بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم القابض الباسط الخافض الرافع المعز المذل السميع البصير.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا. قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا. قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا.
An excerpt from a story mentioned in Surah Al-Qalam, the 68th surah. There are a bunch of farmers and they are about to harvest the next morning, and it's going to be a really fruitful harvest. And they want to make sure that they go early in the morning before poor people wake up, because the poor people in the village also know it's harvest day. So they're going to show up outside the farms and outside the gardens, hoping that they can throw some fruits their way, give them some of it, and receive some charity. So they make a scheme that they're going to try to get there before any of the poor people show up. And so the language is, أَلَّا يَدْخُلَنَّهَا الْيَوْمَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِسْكِينٌ. Make sure that not a single poor person and a single bankrupt person enters upon you, meaning shows up in your vicinity. Just make sure you speak in a low voice not to wake anybody up, and go in a sneaky way and get back. Now they didn't push, in other places in the Qur'an, يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ, he pushes the orphan. لَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, he doesn't encourage the feeding of the poor. Other places you have people speaking ill or speaking harshly to the poor, right? Or reminding them that you're doing them a favor. But in this ayah, they haven't had any interaction with the poor. They haven't. They weren't mean to anyone. They didn't yell at anyone. They simply talked to each other and said, let's avoid them. Let's just have the intention of not helping them. That's all. I mean, their speech doesn't really amount to anything more than an intention to not help. That's it. That's their crime. And when they got to the garden, there was nothing there. It was فَطَافَ عَلَيْهَا طَائِفٌ مِّن رَبِّكَ وَهُمْ نَائِمُونَ. Allah sent a heavenly punishment to their garden, where when they got there, they actually said, إِنَّا لَضَالُونَ. We don't even did we come to the right place? This can't be the place. Wait, this is our place? How are we made bankrupt? In other words, their denial, in their hearts, their desire to deny the bankrupt landed them becoming bankrupt. Be careful how you think about those in need. If you just simply think about them as a nuisance, that is a disease that lies deep inside your heart, and there are no bigger consequences in this life and in the next than diseases that are carried in our hearts. Actions are actually, they're worth something, but the matters of the heart are worth way, way, way more. You may not have done it, these people haven't done an evil deed yet. They've just stated the intention to not help. But that intention itself is enough to enrage Allah, when that intention was made with such commitment. May Allah Azza wa Jal keep us of those who have a clean heart towards other people, and not allow the corruptions inside of our hearts to manifest in things that are going to harm us in this life and harm us in the next. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In 2005, around 150 world leaders gathered at the United Nations in order to define terrorism. After 2 days, the summit ended without reaching a consensus about the definition of the word terrorism. They issued a declaration stating that there was no reason for defining terrorism since everyone already knew what terrorism was. Of course, this is not the truth. The truth is that if they had defined terrorism properly, half of them at least should have gone off to jail. Terrorism has been perpetrated by many people, organizations, and states as well. What is really serious about this issue is that although nowadays terrorism is considered the most heinous crime of all, and although it is the crime that people are being warned about constantly, most governments have no proper definition for terrorism. However, international law experts and political science professors do have a very clear definition of terrorism. They define it as not only the killing of civilians, but the mere targeting of civilians. So if someone targets civilians but fails to kill them, that is still considered an act of terrorism. But again, the phrase targeting of civilians is not entirely correct, because civilians may be a legitimate target if they are militia, that is, armed civilians. This may make them a legitimate target in some cases. So a better definition is targeting of non-armed people or people who are not engaged in fighting. Well, what if someone kills his wife? Is this considered terrorism? Well, of course not, because there is no political agenda here. So accordingly, the proper definition is the targeting of unarmed civilians in order to promote a political agenda. Terrorism has been committed by individuals, by groups, and by governments as well. The individuals who committed terrorist attacks are not only Muslims. We have a striking example of an individual terrorist, a Jewish man called Baruch Goldstein, who in the 80s killed 39 Muslims as they were prostrating in prayers at the Ibrahimi Mosque in Palestine. This is clearly terrorism. There is also a famous Christian called Timothy McVeigh, who was responsible for the Oklahoma bombings, which left 1,000 people dead and injured. This is a Christian. There are also Muslims who took part in many terrorist attacks that we all know about. So terrorism has been practiced by Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and has been practiced by groups and organizations as well. One of the most famous of these is the Tamil Tigers, which is a Hindu guerrilla organization in Sri Lanka. This organization has actually carried out more bombings, including suicide bombings, than any other organization in the world. However, the worst type of terrorism is terrorism performed by countries or governments. Why is that so? It is because governments are expected to have more responsibility than individuals. In other words, what cannot be accepted from individuals definitely cannot be accepted from governments. When we witness the systematic killing of Palestinians and the bombing of Gaza and other Palestinian cities that have been going on for tens of years, we have to say that it is terrorism. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is another blatant example. Here, 2 Japanese cities were bombed with nuclear bombs. Unarmed civilians were intentionally targeted, and the purpose was to pressure the Japanese government to surrender during the World War II. This is clearly terrorism because there was a political agenda involved. What about the bombing of German cities and the bombing of London during the World War II? In all these cases, governments were targeting unarmed civilians in order to promote a certain political agenda. Unfortunately, these governments are not very smart because bombing of civilians never accomplished anything. For example, when German cities were bombed during World War II, the purpose was to make the German people rise against Hitler. However, the result was that the Germans rallied even more around Hitler and gave him justification for the criminal and racist actions he was perpetrating, all because of the attacks they had been subjected to. It is very important here to clarify the misconceptions that are prevalent among youth and which are used to advocate terrorist actions. For example, I remember when I was in a European country talking about the issue of terrorism, and I said that Islam does not approve of actions like the events of 9/11 or events of 7/7 in London or those of the 11th of March in Madrid. It does not approve of any of this. This was going on in front of a huge audience of non-Muslims as well as some Muslims. Unfortunately, 6 or 7 Muslims among them met my words with an uproar. They stood up, yelled, and threw chairs at me and even spat at me, making an altogether horrid scene. The security personnel came to escort them out, but I intervened and said that if they were taken out at this point, it might look to some people that I am the one misrepresenting Islam and that these people represented true Islam. I said that since they had voiced their opinions so vehemently, they must follow them with an explanation for all. So I asked them, please come and tell me what I am saying that is so wrong. Do you want to say that Islam approves of all the incidents I was talking about? One of them said, yes, you are an apostate. So I asked him, why? He said, because you obviously do not read the Quran. So I told him, well, please tell me where in the Quran you find proof that Islam condones such actions. He answered, we have a rule mentioned in the Quran that says, and if you punish, then let your punishment be proportionate to the wrong that has been done to you. That means that just like they did to you, you do to them. They killed our civilians and innocent people in Palestine, in Iraq, in Bosnia, and in Kashmir. And the Quranic verse says that I can do to them what they did to me. So I answered, okay, but do you know that non-Muslims not only killed our innocent people, they also raped our women in Bosnia and Herzegovina? So do you believe that you are entitled to rape their women? You said the verse gives you the right to do to them what they did to you. He answered, no. So I pressed on. Why not? You said the verse gives you the right to retaliate in kind. So when cornered, he said, no, but rape entails fornication and that is a sin. So my obvious answer was, are you saying that fornication is a sin but killing innocent people is not? They are both sins. You must understand that the verse you quoted is talking about the magnitude of the retaliation and not the form of retaliation. In other words, it is equivalent to the verse that is in the Bible and that is also present in the Quran, which says, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a nose for a nose, and an ear for an ear. So its true meaning is that one eye should suffice for one eye, and not 2 eyes for an eye. 1 tooth for 1 tooth, and not 32 teeth in retaliation for 1 tooth. In other words, you have the right to retaliate with the same magnitude. Do not exceed your limits. But even if your enemy rapes women, you should not do the same because you are a Muslim. If your enemy kills innocent people, you should not do the same because you are a Muslim. If your enemy has no principles that prevent him from committing such things, that is his affair. But you have principles that prevent you from committing such actions. You have the Quran. You have your religion. So what I want to make clear here is that the Quran criticizes Muslims when they imitate certain actions done by non-Muslims. It says, you are then like them. But we should never resort to that because we have our religious ethical principles that forbid us from doing such things. Next, we come to another misconception, which is that the Quran openly promotes terrorism as evidenced by the verse that says, make ready for them all that you can of armed forces and the tethered horses, that you may thereby terrorize the enemy of Allah and your enemy. So some people say, see, here it is loud and clear. It says that you may terrorize. So terrorism is written in the Quran as a command. But here we must stop and examine this more closely. To start with, there are 2 kinds of terrorism or terrorization, one of which is praised and one of which is condemned. The kind of terrorization which is praised and approved of is the kind that, for example, a policeman would use if he saw a thief running away with a sack full of jewels he had just stolen. Would it make sense for the policeman to say, wait a moment please, fear God man, I will give you 10 minutes to go back and return those jewels so you don't go to hell? Or would it make more sense for the policeman to take out his gun and say, stop, freeze, and put your hands in the air? If you don't stop, I will shoot. This is a form of terrorization, to instill terror in someone, but it is acceptable. Another point is that the verse we just mentioned is intended as a deterrent. If God were commanding me to terrorize a specific people, he should have indicated who they were. But the verse actually says to terrorize the enemy of Allah and your enemy and others besides them that you know not, but Allah knows them. So what does that mean? How can I terrorize certain people if I do not know who they are? The verse really means that when you have a powerful army, you will deter your enemy and the enemies of God and others that you may not know but are planning to attack you. All of these will be deterred and will not attack you even if you are oblivious as to whom they are. I remember very well that in 2009 I went to give a lecture to a group of American officers from the United States National War College. At the end of the lecture, they gave me a medal as a gift. On one side it was written the words National War College, and on the other side is the college motto, which in Latin it says, Qui desiderat pacem preparet bellum. Translated, it means, anyone who wants peace must prepare for war. Meaning that you must prepare your armed forces and have a strong army so that you can live in peace and nobody can dare to attack you. Another misconception about Islam is that it orders the killing of people everywhere. In 2003, I was at the American University in Washington, D.C., and there was an evangelical clergyman who had come for a debate with me. He started the debate by saying, "It is disturbing to live in a country with people whose book tells them regarding us, kill them wherever you find them," basically suggesting that in order to be devout Muslims, we should be walking around with a machine gun in each hand in order to kill every non-Muslim that we come across. I took out all the money I have in my pocket, and it was around $100, and said, "I will give this to the one who will answer my question." How can you find words that are even more violent and worse than what he said from a toddler's book? If someone can explain how this is possible, I will give him this money. Of course, everyone was confused and said, "How?" I replied, "All you need to do is to use Dr. Pat's magic scissors." Dr. Pat, sitting next to me here, has a pair of magic scissors that he uses to cut out some words from the Quran and quote them out of context. He just quotes the few words, "Kill them wherever you find them," which are only a small part of a much longer verse, 4 lines long. If we just read a few words further along, we find that it says, "Kill them wherever you find them and drive them out from where they drove you out." This verse was sent to people who had been driven out of their homes. These people's homes in Mecca were occupied by aggressors. I am not saying that this verse is no longer valid. On the contrary, till this day, anybody who's turned out of his home or whose land is occupied has the right to fight the occupiers. Then I continued by asking Dr. Pat, "Why didn't you continue the verse? You either did that intentionally or you did it unintentionally. You either did it on purpose in order to mislead the audience sitting in front of us, or else you did it unintentionally because you are ignorant of the remainder of the verse." I then left the microphone and looked at him in order to direct the attention of the audience towards him, waiting for his answer as to whether he was deceptive or ignorant. Pat never answered the question, and it was an embarrassment to himself as well as the members of the Christian club that had invited him to come all the way from Arkansas to participate in a debate. The debate lasted for only 15 minutes. This is the immoral cut and paste game that they always play against Muslims. Cut off words and present it out of context. Islam is being attacked very aggressively, and all of us Muslims have a duty to defend it. But before we do so, we must first understand Islam properly so that we do not end up harming it. Thank you very much.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today I will be discussing laziness and how to overcome it. The Arabic term for laziness is ghasl, and it's considered to be a disease. It begins as a mindset, first of all, followed by an effect on the heart, and then finally the body becomes less willing. It is a tool of shaitan. He whispers things like, "You don't need to pray Fajr, you need your sleep," or with regards sin, "Everyone else is doing it." The modern idea of perfectionism is also used by shaitan and actually contributes to laziness. You see, if we place pressure on ourselves to be absolutely perfect all of the time, then we begin to create mountains out of the simple requirements of deen. We start saying things like, "It's too hard for me, I'll leave it." But perfectionism is not required. All that is required is that we try our best with the best of intentions. Laziness is not to be taken lightly, and we have been taught several du'as to overcome it. For instance, the Prophet ﷺ used to say, "O Allah, I seek refuge from incapability and laziness." Brothers and sisters, we really should have no room for laziness in our lives. Why? Because this life is a test. How many times have we heard this without really understanding what it means? It means whatever we do in this life determines whether we will end up in heaven or hell for eternity. The thing about this life is that it is short and there are no guarantees as to how long our life will be. This life contains pleasures and pains to some extent. However, the thing about the hereafter is that it contains pleasures we cannot imagine, but by the same token, it contains horrors we cannot imagine too. This life on earth is our only opportunity to live it well, so that in the hereafter we will not suffer unimaginable horrors, but live in bliss for eternity. I would like to go through a few ways to help us overcome laziness. 1. Seek help in dhikr. Doing dhikr helps us overcome laziness, and it should boost our energy levels. Fatima radiallahu an was taught by her father a means to boost her energy in the following way. The Prophet ﷺ told her, "Shall I not teach you something better than what you asked for? When you go to your bed, magnify Allah 34 times, glorify Him 33 times, and praise Him 33 times. That is better for you than a servant." Allahu Akbar allows us to reflect on Allah's majesty and how He provides a solution to all our problems. Subhanallah brings to mind the universe and creation in all of its glory. Alhamdulillah allows us to think of Allah's numerous blessings upon us, from our 5 senses to the food and shelter we enjoy. 2. Seek help through salah. Laziness is mentioned twice in the Qur'an, and on both occasions linked with salah. We are required to pray 5 times a day, a daily obligation, a pillar of Islam, and arguably one of the most difficult things to maintain, particularly the Fajr prayer. But if we can maintain our daily prayers, then other requirements of the deen become easier. If, however, we struggle with salah, how can we begin to cope with other requirements of the deen such as zakah, hajj or fasting? Also, salah being a physical process keeps our bodies active and supple. 3. Aim high. The Prophet ﷺ and the Sahabas radiallahu an are shining examples for us to aim at being like. True, we may never attain anything close to them, but we can still learn from them and try our best to be as good as we can be. The Sahaba approached the Qur'an for guidance with a complete willingness to submit. They treated the Qur'an like we do our mobile phones today. They kept it close and followed it to the letter. 4. Set religious goals in life. Be proactive. Set yourselves goals within the deen and try to achieve them. This keeps your spiritual growth alive. The internet is a fantastic resource. There is access to many scholars with suggestions of how to live our lives and maintain our deen. 5. Good company. Seek out the company of good people, grateful people, hard-working people. This will impact on your own attitude. Take an initiative to join forums and groups online. 6. Find something practical to do. Exercise, gardening, baking, volunteering. These activities are all good for us and keep us physically active. At the same time, they produce endorphins which provide us with the urge and motivation to do more. Remember, make it a point to ask of Allah daily to put blessings into your time. Once you ask Allah, Allah will be sure to help you.
Reminder to myself and all of you that our Prophet ﷺ reminded us to follow up Ramadan with 6 of Shawwal. And by the way, even in this there is a philosophy. SubhanAllah, after fasting so many days, there's a big incentive. Don't give up fasting. Don't just say, khalas, end of story, month over. No, 6 days dangling in front of you. There's a reward there. Why? There's a philosophy here, there's an attitude here that worship never stops. Worship never stops. You've done 30, that's wajib. The Prophet ﷺ strongly encouraged, do 6 more. Bismillah, go for it. 6 more, and you will get the rewards of the full year. And this is the only month where we are encouraged to fast 6 days in this manner, the 6th of Shawwal. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever follows up the fasting of Ramadan with 6 fasts of Shawwal, it is as if he has fasted the whole year. And of course the reason for this, as we know, is that every good deed is rewarded 10 times. So the fast of Ramadan, the 1 month, will count as 10 months. And the fast of 6 days of Shawwal will count as 60 days, which is 2 months. So 10 months plus 2 months is the year. And so whoever follows up Ramadan with the 6th of Shawwal, it is as if he has fasted the whole year. And I encourage myself and all of you, not just the 6th of Shawwal, 3 months of every, 3 days of every month. The Prophet ﷺ strongly encouraged us, 3 days of every month, especially the 14th, 15th, 16th of the Islamic calendar. And for those who want more than this, Mondays and Thursdays of every week. This is of course the perfection. Even more than this is even possible. But we've done 30 days. Let's try to do 1 or 2 or 3 days every month. And for Shawwal, let's aim even higher, 6 days of Shawwal. And a fiqh point, brothers and sisters, if anybody has not finished Ramadan for a legitimate reason, suppose somebody fell sick, or the sisters had their monthly issue and they were not able to fast for a number of days, the strongest position, brothers and sisters, and this is common sense, they need to make up Ramadan before they fast the 6th of Shawwal. Therefore, suppose a sister has to make up 7 days, then in Shawwal she will have to fast 13 if she wishes to have the whole 7 plus 6. And that is because the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever fasts Ramadan and then finishes 6 of Shawwal. And the person who still has 7 fasts or 5 fasts or 3 fasts has not quite fasted Ramadan. And therefore, if we have some leftover fast, then we need to do a little bit extra because we didn't fast in Ramadan. So the person who didn't fast 7 days in Ramadan, they didn't fast Ramadan. They need to make it up in Shawwal. If they want to do the 6th of Shawwal, if they want to be a bit more lax about this, then the Sharia is open. They can make it up anytime until the next Ramadan, but they will miss the beautiful rewards of the 6th fast of Shawwal.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, a quick message from the team at Voice of Islam. Every time our show airs, we reach a potential audience in the hundreds of thousands. We bring the truth about Islam to non-Muslims and help Muslims learn more about their own faith. Every time something positive comes from Voice of Islam being on air, those people who have contributed and made the broadcast possible share in the potential rewards, inshallah. We really appreciate people donating what they can. Every little bit helps us meet the cost of broadcasting each week. We sincerely thank everyone who has helped us and continues to do so, and we look forward to more help in the future, inshallah. If you are keen to contribute, please visit our website for details of how to do so.
Allah Azza wa Jal continues the subject after the description of Jannah yesterday, back to the Qur'an. The ayah before was actually about the Qur'an also, and Allah Azza wa Jal had given the challenge, إِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ. If you're in any doubt about what we've sent down on our slave, then produce anything of its like, anywhere near remotely of its like, or its likeness. وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Now, on the one hand, the challenge was, you can't produce anything like the Qur'an. But just because they couldn't produce anything like it, and they couldn't come up with an alternative, doesn't mean that they're going to stop attacking the religion. So if you can't provide an alternative, the only thing left for you to do is now attack what they have. Criticize what they have. Yeah, fine, I won't meet the challenge, but come on, it's got so many problems. So actually you'll find this second tier still existing today. And what's that second tier? Well, we can't produce something like the Qur'an, so let's just keep on criticizing it, finding things in it that we can poke fun at, or say, how does this make any sense? How does that make any sense? That mentality still exists to this day. One more thing to say, actually, in recent times, actually, this happened, in my experience, this happened when I was a college student, and I was just starting to learn some Arabic, and I remember, this is so old, this is when the internet was new. So this is like back when GeoCities pages were popular, for some of you who remember, right? And then somebody some university students at Georgetown University put up a web page that said, because Georgetown has an Arabic program, a bachelor's degree in Arabic, a master's, and a PhD in Arabic. These were master's level students of the Arabic language. And they said, we've, as our class project, we produced a surah like the Qur'an. And they put it up on GeoCities. It was an Uthmani script. Everything rhymed. It looked like the Mus'haf. And it read like the Mus'haf, and they said, look, we produced a surah like the Qur'an. And, then there have been other attempts. People have done this and said, okay, look, the Qur'an issued a challenge, and here it is. My response to the challenge, here's a surah. And then they have several people come along, other professors, other colleagues, other students, who are their shuhada min dunillah, who say, yeah, it is like the Qur'an. So Allah said, produce something like the Qur'an and call your witnesses. So they said, okay, here's something like the Qur'an, and we've got our witnesses. So done deal. So that's their idea. Now, the problem is the Qur'an did not reduce its challenge to one thing. Produce something in Arabic. Produce something that matches its style. Produce something that uniquely matches it in context. The Qur'an is unmatchable from so many different angles, all at the same time, that it actually becomes impossible for humanity to replace. Rasulullah ﷺ is bringing about a change in this society. Is there any outside influence? Are there foreign invasions and new culture coming in and invading? No. It's just this man with an invisible delivery of the Qur'an, right? Now what happens in these 23 years? There are people that change not just the way they eat, but also the way they sleep, but also the way they wake up, but also the way they clean themselves, but also the way they get married, but also the way they get divorced, the way they love, the way they hate, the way they raise their eyes, the way they lower their eyes, the way they lower their voices, the way they raise their voices, who their friends are, who their enemies. Everything changed in 23 years. Culturally, socially, spiritually, economically, politically. There is not one facet of human life for these people who believed in the Prophet ﷺ that it didn't change. And in 23 years, this society changes in every imaginable way. Allah Azza wa Jalla says about just the words of Allah, He compares them to the ocean. قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي وَلَوْ جِئْنَا بِمِثْلِهِ مَدَدًا. That if the oceans were turned into ink to appreciate for the purpose of the words of my master, if you were to just try to appreciate the words of Allah with ink that was the worth of oceans, you wouldn't be able to find enough ink. And the words of Allah would still remain unappreciated. You wouldn't be able to encompass it. That's the challenge of Qur'an. So it wasn't met and it will not be met. That is our iman. On the other hand, criticism against the Qur'an will always be there. The challenge is one thing. It's impossible to meet. Well, if that's impossible, well, at least now you're upset. So when you're upset, of course, you're going to find something to complain about. Something to pick at. Oh, there are so many contradictions in the Quran. Doesn't even make sense. It says this and it says that, and there's going to be all this kind of talk, right? And Allah Azza wa Jalla preempts it in the surah. He says, "Inna Allah la yastahi." No doubt about it, it is in fact Allah. He is not ashamed. An yadriba mathalan. Ma. To give an example. Arabic students know that the word mathal is nakira, mathalan. When you add ma, it actually makes it even more. This is ma al-ibhamiyya. This is actually making it even more ambiguous. Any kind of example whatsoever. In Arabic expression, back in the day and even today, if somebody says, man, I'm hungry, give me some food. What do you want to eat? Shay'an ma. Just give me something, man. Anything, I don't care. It's all, doesn't matter, just let me eat. This is ma. In other words, Allah says, Allah has no embarrassment. He has no hesitation in dropping whatever example, in striking an example of any kind whatsoever. This is actually an educational principle in the Book of Allah. And from it, we learn educational philosophy. In order to get the point across, you have to get out of your comfort zone, and you can't be formal. When you think about the benefit of the student, you have to talk to the student at a level that the student will understand. You shouldn't just talk in high language with big words and, to impress somebody of how much you know, and how much exhaustive vocabulary you have, and how many books you can quote. That's not teaching. You're just trying to impress someone with how much you know. Teaching is when you talk to people in a way they can actually learn. Allah Azza wa Jalla, let me guarantee you, has better vocabulary than all of us. He has a more sophisticated knowledge of science than any scientist. He has more sophisticated, deeper understanding of the nuances of the unseen and the seen and iman than any of us. But Allah chooses, subhanahu wa ta'ala, to talk in language, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنِ لِلذِّكْرِ. He made the Qur'an easy. Sometimes you read a book on aqidah, Or you get into, for example, the ayat are coming later. فَسَوَّاهُنَّ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى عَلَى الْعَرْشِ ثُمَّ الْإِسْتِوَاء عَلَى الْعَرْشِ. You study tafsir of this ayah. You read the Mu'tazilis and the Maturidis, and you read Imam Razi, and you read Ruh al-Ma'ani, al-Alusi, and you're reading pages and pages and pages of what does it mean, and it's so abstract, you want to pull your hair out. And Allah, when He speaks, He's so straightforward, simple, no complications. Study a philosophy text. College students have taken philosophy classes before. How much fun is it to read a philosophy essay? You just bang your head on it. What is he saying? Going around in abstract circles. But Qur'an, Allah Azza wa Jal could have made it, because what they do, by the way. PhD papers, academics, scholars, they actually purposely make their papers more difficult because that's their way of showing off how academic they are, how sophisticated they are, using big vocabulary even when they don't need to, And this notion is actually something shattered in the Qur'an. Allah is not ashamed to give any example.
Glory to Allah, who created in pairs all things that the earth produces, as well as their own humankind, and other things of which they have no knowledge. The word azwaj in the verse is the plural form of zuj and means pairs or partners. That is why husband and wife are defined as zuj, zucha. As it is seen, this word defines the opposites among similar things and being partners. 3 examples are given about the creation in pairs mentioned in the verse. First example, pairs that grow from soil. The first thing that comes to mind in this category is femininity and masculinity in plants. We will not mention about it now, as we have discussed in another work. Second example, pairs that are created from their own selves. The first thing that comes to mind in this category is the creation of humans as males and females. Third example, pairs that are created from things that we do not know. So, what is meant with the expression, pairs that are created from things that we do not know? The people who lived during the revelation of the Qur'an were not aware of the most of creation in pairs in the universe. While femininity and masculinity is the equivalence of the concept of pair, the expression of the verse, other things of which they have no knowledge, has a wider meaning. Thus, at the present time, we see one of the meanings that the verse indicates. As research conducted on the structure of the atom has developed, it has become clear that the existent particles are not limited only to protons, neutrons, and electrons, and the atom has a more complex, delicate, and perfect nature than we think. Creation in pairs is also valid for the smallest particles of atoms. A proton has its pair, antiproton. An electron is coupled with the positron, and a neutron possesses an antineutron. The creation of matter in pairs is one of the most important discoveries of physics. Paul Dirac, a British scientist, was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1933 for his discovery in this field. The discovery of Dirac is known as parity, and thanks to this discovery, it has been presented that the matter has a pair called antimatter. Antimatter bears the opposite characteristics of matter. For example, contrary to matter, Antimatter electrons are positive and protons are negative. This fact is expressed in a scientific source as follows. Every particle has its antiparticle of opposite charge. The uncertainty relation tells us that the existence and non-existence of pairs forms simultaneously everywhere and at all times. As we see, the expression of the Qur'an, "We created other things of which they have no knowledge," is so full of wisdom and so mysterious. As Badiuzzaman Sayyid Nursi said, "As time grows older, the Qur'an grows younger." That is, as science develops with the progress of time, many mysteries of the Qur'an are revealed. Virtually, the Qur'an grows younger. Let us see how many pairs of which we have no knowledge will be discovered, and science will prostrate before the Qur'an. People used to have serious contradictions about the shape of the earth for centuries, and most of them claimed that the earth was flat, just like a tray. The roundness of the earth has been verified as a result of logical and mathematical explanations over the last centuries. After the development of technology, it was also visually proven that the earth was round when men went to space and the moon. In fact, the Qur'an referred to this fact miraculously centuries ago. He created the heavens and the earth in true proportions. He wraps the night up in the day and wraps the day up in the night. The Arabic word which is translated as to wrap in the verse is kewara. This word comes from the same root as the word kura, sphere, which also exists in the Turkish language. In Arabic, this verb is commonly used in order to express the action of wrapping turban around the head, as well as wrapping an object around an aspheric thing. This verb, which is used for wrapping a turban around an aspheric thing, like the head, is also used in order to express wrapping the night up in the day. In the verse, while it is expressed that the night is wrapped up in the day, it is also expressed that the day is wrapped up in the night. The reason for the formation of day and night is the aspheric structure of the earth. The aforementioned action of this verse can only be actualized if and only if the earth has a spherical structure. Another verse which refers to the spherical structure of the earth is as follows. And after that he spread the earth. In this verse, the word which is translated as spread is deha. The word deha comes from the root of dahu, which means to spread. Although the word dahu means to spread or to set out, this is not a prosaic action in terms of its meaning. This word is used to describe actions for setting out and adjusting spherically. The meaning of roundness is also present in other words derived from dahu. For example, the word dahu is also used to describe children dropping a ball into a hole in the ground, games involving throwing stones into holes, and games played with walnuts. Words derived from that root are also used for an ostrich to make a nest, to clean stones from the place where it is about to lie down, for the place where it lays its eggs, and the egg itself. Indeed, the shape of the earth is rounded in a way that resembles an egg. The flattened spherical shape of the earth is described as geoid. In this regard, the use of the word deha in the verse contains important information about the earth given by Allah. It is understood from these explanations that the Quran informs us about the roundness of the earth. However, it does not explicitly describe it, but only indicates it so that centuries that could not understand the roundness of the earth would not suspect about the news of the Quran and oppose it. Is it possible for a human being who does not know how to read or write to discover the roundness of the earth on his own 1400 years ago? Definitely not. Then this news cannot be the word of a human being. This news can only be the word of Allah, who created the earth and gave the aspheric shape to it. We believe in it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back to our series People of Qur'an, where every night I share with you a story from our pious predecessors of how they interacted with the Qur'an. So we move on now to Surah Al-Baqarah. And there's a very interesting hadith from Omar al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Omar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, before Islam, he was a drinker. Actually, many of the companions were drinkers. And Omar al-Khattab, when he came back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sincerely wanted to make sure that he was leaving behind anything, that would be objectionable, and anything that he had to do away with for the sake of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Umar used to sincerely ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to clarify certain matters for him. And many of us know about the relationship between Umar radiallahu anhu's dua and certain verses of the Qur'an, particularly the ayat about alcohol, but let's look at this narration in particular, which is narrated in Sunnah Tirmidhi. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he used to make this dua. He used to say, Allahumma bayyin lana fil khamri bayana shifa'an. Oh Allah, make this matter of khamr, of alcohol, intoxicants, make it as clear as it can be for us. Give us clarity on this issue. So when he made that dua the first time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed verse 219 in Surah Al-Baqarah, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. That they ask you about khamr and maysir, they ask you about intoxicants and gambling. Say that, there are some beneficial things, there's good and bad in drinking, but the harm far outweighs the good. But it still didn't prohibit khamr at this point. So Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when that verse was revealed, he started to make the same dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he stood up and he said, Allahumma bayyin lana fil khamri bayana shifa'an. Oh Allah, give us clarity on this issue of intoxicants. I sincerely want to know. I'm not trying to make it halal if it's really haram. I really want to know if this is haram for us all the time or at certain times. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the 43rd verse in Surah An-Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى حَتَّى تَعْلَمُوا مَا تَقُولُونَ. O you who believe, do not approach the prayer while you are drunk, until you know that which you are saying. Now, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, حَتَّى تَعْلَمُوا مَا تَقُولُونَ, until you're sure of what you're saying? Because what ended up happening is that a group of Sahaba were praying, and the companion that was leading the salah was drunk, and it was Salat al-Maghrib, so he started mixing up a bunch of verses and jumping from surah to surah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited a person to come to salah while they were drunk. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, at this point now, the companions would drink either way before salah so that they weren't intoxicated when they came, or they'd start drinking after Salat al-Isha. So Umar radiallahu anhu once again made dua, Allahumma bayyin lana fil khamri bayana shifa'an. Oh Allah, make this matter of khamr clear for us, clarify it for us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the 91st verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah, إنما يريد الشيطان أن يوقع بينكم العداوة والبغضاء في الخمر والميسر ويصدكم عن ذكر الله وعن الصلاة فهل أنتم منتهون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the shaitan wishes to deceive you and wishes to bring about enmity and wishes to ruin you essentially through liquor and intoxicants and gambling. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and He seeks to divert you from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ? Like, is this enough for you to quit now? Are you guys going to stop now? Are you going to avoid it now? Umar radiallahu anhu, when this verse was revealed, he said, Intahayna, we're done. You know, I'm not going to have to make this dua anymore. Now, to add on to this story, some of the Sahaba then, they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said, well, Ya Rasulullah, what happened to our companions that died in battle? Some of them died as shuhada, and some of them died in their beds, but they were righteous people, and they used to drink. What happens to those people now? So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the next verse, verse 93 in Surah Al-Ma'idah, لَيْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ جُنَاحٌ فِي مَا طَعِمُوا, that there is no blame on those who believed and did righteous deeds for that which they consumed in the past. So they're forgiven. Now, what I really want to point out here, which is really significant, is that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was looking for truth. He wasn't looking for a loophole. He wasn't looking for convenience, because his love for Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was greater than his love for alcohol, was greater than his love for that drug. And the proof of that as well is what's narrated in the Sahihain, in the two Sahihs, that Omar actually stood up and he said, "O people, the prohibition of khamr is clear. The prohibition of intoxicants is clear. We're not going to sit there and say, well, only if it came from this source or that source." He said, whether it comes from grapes, dates, honey, wheat, or barley. He said, khamr is what intoxicates the mind. فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ? So will you stop and avoid it completely? So a lot of times people come to me and say, what about this drug? What about that drug? You know, it's not technically alcohol. If it intoxicates, it is khamr. And we should have that same level of sincerity that Umar radiallahu anhu had, which is to want to know the truth so we can follow it, not to want to find a loophole so that we can continue to obey our desires. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us that sincerity and that pursuit of truth as well. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. See you next time on our People of Qur'an series. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
He was brilliant, extremely clever, always aware of whatever is happening around him. He was uniquely objective, very energetic, well organized, and he had an extraordinary memory. He always planned ahead of time. He knew what had to be done today and what could be postponed till tomorrow. Throughout history, there have been people who were outstanding in politics, and some in economy, and some in military skills, and some in management. He was all of those combined. That was Prophet Muhammad.
I always knew that this was going to be a step that I would take. At first I was a little hesitant because I knew things were going to change, but then I decided it was the right decision to make. So on the 1st of January 2004, my journey began and I finally decided to put on the hijab. Every girl who puts on the hijab is faced with some sort of obstacle. For some, it's their families not wanting them to wear it. Others have self-esteem issues with it. Others face doubts about it. The challenge I faced was one that many others have also faced. Starting and going to a high school with hardly any Muslims and where you're the first Muslim people have met was no easy task. As teenagers, fitting in is the most fundamental thing in high school. Having no friends in high school is something every teenager tries to avoid. So I tried to be like them. Whatever the latest trend was, I went along with it. Not just that, but I needed to keep up with the latest beauty standards. Looking in the mirror for me was an exercise to try and pinpoint all the things wrong with me and that I needed to change. My self-esteem became dependent on the makeup I wore. On top of this, there was no way I could hide the fact that I was not like the other kids at school. I was embarrassed and I would often ask myself why I needed to be so different. So I went about my high school life struggling with my identity, trying to answer the question of who I was really. The truth is, I felt extremely lonely. Looking back, the reasoning why I was so embarrassed of who I was because I had yet not fully understood the hijab. I thought the hijab was purely about modesty. I thought the hijab was there just to protect women from the gaze of men. But unfortunately, that was a very shallow and two-dimensional understanding of the hijab. It was not until I got to uni and started to take learning about my religion seriously that something happened. I fell in love. I fell in love with the hijab because I came to understand that it was not simply a piece of fabric draped over my body to conceal beauty and preserve modesty. It was a physical manifestation of my submission and connection with my Lord, an external representation of my inward spirituality. When I learnt the rationale for the hijab presented in the Qur'an, I was blown away. Not only did it shatter my shallow understanding of the hijab, it proved to me God had validated my beauty. Therefore, I need to make the most of the opportunities and blessings I've been gifted with. Knowing this has actually pushed me to constantly improve myself and ensure my actions and character are in line with the teachings of Islam. But we need to understand that by wearing the hijab, I'm not declaring I am Islam. Rather, I am a Muslim, meaning I am someone who is trying to follow this religion, who accepts it as the truth, sees beauty in it, and hopes to beautify myself with it. Ultimately, no one is perfect. As humans, we're susceptible to making mistakes. The hijab doesn't make you a more perfect or righteous human being. Rather, it's a constant reminder to keep striving and excel in your personal and spiritual development. Remember, no matter how dark the world gets, be like that star that stands out and shines the way for others to see.
الخافض